All right, welcome to the Local Energy Podcast. I don't know, I have so much energy today for this conversation. Wade's here, and our guest today is John Baez, who's the pipe whisperer. John, that was like my first stab at saying your name properly, but I've known you as pipe whisperer for, I don't know, at least the last year and a half. My son's room is covered in your logo with all the stickers. So when you sent me a pack of those, he got his hands on them. So man, and the thing is, like when we turned on this camera for the first time, this is the first time I'd actually seen what you look like. Otherwise, it's just been this radio voice. So excited to have you on and learn what you do.
That's how it goes. A lot of people may not know my name, my actual name, but they've heard the nickname.
I
And,
f I thought it was I thought you were, like, in a non-account, like, you just wanted to, like, keep it, low profile, and you do to a sense, but now
you,
you're out there.
I try not to put my personal stuff out there, but as far as like business, I'm open to networking and trying to help the industry because essentially what I've done over the last 30 years was passed on to me. It's not been I wasn't born doing this stuff. And a lot of the techniques and the way that I think comes from someone that taught me how to think. That was probably the most important thing that I learned. Now, it's the hardest thing to learn because you have to imagine when you're growing up, your parents have a lot to do with what your thought processes are. And most of the time you end up being rebellious and you think against the norm and think against, what they find to be common sense. And my mentor, whenever we first started, he told me it's not common sense. This is uncommon sense because it just don't exist. It has to be learned. Most of the time you're not born. You don't come out of the chute, like he said, knowing that you're supposed to do this or do that. Someone's got to be the one to tell you. And I was fortunate enough to work for somebody that was willing to teach me. Now, it wasn't the easiest process. I can tell you that because he would call you everything under the sun and screaming, hollering, throwing stuff. And fortunately for me, that's the way I was raised with my father. I mean, my father he was not a bashful guy. So whenever I started working with him, it was second nature. Matter of fact, when I was asked to work full time because I started part time, I asked to work full time during one of the summers. The the longest bet I had was 2 weeks to last. They
Okay.
they they just knew you're going to be gone. This guy is going to run you off. You're going to quit. Is what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And then 9 years later, I outlasted everyone that was in the shop. And I ended up working for him for about 13 and a half years. And he
Hmm.
sold out and all that stuff. But we went to hell and back together. And the best thing that could have happened to me, I think, was seeing things from the owner's perspective. So I'm looking from the top down, where he would complain, this guy did this, and he doesn't understand how much this costs. And, there I am, a dumb kid listening, and I'm thinking, then I ask a stupid question like, well, how much does that cost? And he looks at me like he wants to strangle me, like, you have no idea. I could tell you thousands of dollars I put into this thing. And I'm just like, if we don't know, we don't know. But a lot of it was just people being employees. I mean, that's employee stuff. So coming up under him, I have no doubt. That's why I'm where I'm at now.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
So, you have like I can tell from talking to you and like the hours that we've talked, like, just weird off the cuff, like, okay, quick phone call here, quick phone call there. You've got a crazy work ethic, and you can tell by where you came from that seems to be the case from,
Yeah.
mentorship and parents and all that. And really funny to, bring that up. So I have a 6-year-old son. And parenting, if you're a new parent, you're trying to figure out like how to do it. And the reality is, and I told my wife this, I'm like, you just kind of lead by example. But you also got to remember, like, your 6-year-old son's probably never actually emptied a dishwasher in his entire life because it's all new to him. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what his chores are, right? As you got to train that, and then eventually, you go off like you and you build explosives for the oil field. So
Right.
let's talk about what you're doing. I know you've got something you've been working on as well on the software side, but I want to talk about maybe historically what you've been working on, what you've been doing, and kind of teach us maybe a little bit about the really that specific field. To be awesome. Just kind of get a 101 and up from there.
So what I've been doing here in the last, let's just say 3.5 years is I went full contract. I have a customer base of my own and I have a lot of salesmen in the field. They don't work for me. They're fishing tool hands that like to work with someone that provides results and doesn't put them in a situation where they have to try to intervene or create even more of a bigger mess. So I work for a particular group of oil companies. I've cut the wireline companies completely out, and I deal directly with the oil companies. Most of the time, they don't even care whose name is on the side of the truck. As long as I'm in the truck running it, they don't care. So I've teamed up with a company called RigUp. And when I started working with them, it was WorkRise. And they're a very large consulting firm. And the operations manager who does their turnkey projects, Dave Simon, he was stuck on a drilling rig, and I went out and did some work for him in the lateral. And it was the last day I got the ticket signed, and the consultant said, my boss said, man, we've got a pretty good wireline guy out here. Well, the guy that got me out there was Jim Humphreys. He was one of my best friends, as a fishing tool hand. And he told him, if you get him out here, there's not going to be any problems. And Travis was like, I'm telling you, man, this is, you're probably the first one I've been around that's just been every question you've asked, I've asked you, you've had an answer for, and you've been right. And I said, well, I appreciate it. And he said, what do you do with these guys? I said, well, I own part of this company for now. I said, but I'm thinking about going back to contract. And his exact words were, dude, you need to talk to my boss. And I said, what do you mean your boss? He said, I work for RigUp, for WorkRise. He said, we have consultants all over the world. We've got, all of this, he's telling me all about the good and the bad. And he said, I guarantee you my boss would pick you up in a heartbeat. So that's how I got back into contract. And now I work with, 5 companies now. I've got RigUp, obviously, which contracts me to WSI Wireline out of Snyder, Third Coast and Midland, Major Wireline in Midland, and Scientific Drilling. They build direct, but there's some companies that I build direct with that I trust, and some that I don't. The ones that if I don't know you, you're going to have to walk the gauntlet through RigUp to make this happen, because RigUp, they give me a $50 million umbrella. So when I'm operating through them, I'm covered. And any decision that I makes, well, there's 100% backing as to what I'm doing. And that's what you want as a wireline company, number one. But number two, the operations manager, I am his wireline expert. Whenever he gets in a bind or has some special project, he'll call me and say, hey, we're looking at doing this, what do you got? And then I'll put ideas together and say, here's what we got. And I offer them services. They offer me the opportunity to build through them. And it's a pretty good synergy of a relationship. If you ask me who I work for, I work for RigUp. That's my backer.
Gotcha.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, obviously, it's your wife. That's how that is.
I
So
hear you there.
my work ethic, like you were saying, my father's proudest achievement is putting in 160 hours in 1 week. He was on a blowout. He was a transport driver. He was on a blowout, and he said, we just kept hauling water. It just kept coming. We just kept hauling. And he said, the guys were dropping out. And he said, I just kept going. He said, the only thing that stopped me was the cattle guard when I finally wrecked into it, when I passed out. And they came and got me and drove me back to the house.
Wow.
That's where I get my work ethic from.
Dang.
Working with my mentor, we've gone as long as a year with no days off. We went 6 months straight after that. After we took a 6-month hiatus, then we're back at it 6 months. I've never been one to not go on a job. Now I'm getting older. Now, if I'm getting tired, I just get someone else to drive for me.
Yeah. It's got to feel good to be in demand, right? To have like sort of sharpen your skills enough and to a point where, people know who you are and what you do. And I think, I think your logo is reminiscent of the Punisher, right? In some sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of got
My
this.
my daughter's the one that did it for me. So
Okay.
I've got a Harley and I've got Willie G skulls all over. And she said I
Yeah.
couldn't find that skull, but I
Yeah.
found this one.
Yep.
And she knew I liked to gamble, so she made it look like a poker chip.
There you go.
And then she put my 13s, that's my lucky number, and then the spade, because I used to tell her when she was a kid, how you call this, you can't change a spade. A spade's a spade once it's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way. I was trying to help her with her cousins,
Yep.
So she said, I've always remembered that that's what I remembered about you. So there it
Yeah.
is. And when I went to teaching, that's why I ended up naming the company Pipe Whisperer LLC,
Love it.
because my wife is just like, we'll call it Pipe Whisperer. We call you Pipe Whisperer anyway. I thought,
Yeah.
I got that logo. I'll run with it.
Yeah.
It worked.
There's so many good stories behind, like, and I know Wade and I were talking, like, every operator, non-operator, they take an animal or and a color. Like, it's always something. It's like very basic, but then some of these, like, the lore behind the logo is so cool. So now when I see your logo, there's like so much more meaning behind it. Hearing that, but like, what's it like? Kind of, I don't want to say I wouldn't liken you to like a rock star, so to speak, right? But you've got that
No,
sort of demand where people are saying, "Hey, this is the guy that we want." You can be more selective. How did you get to that point? Like what did you do right, or what did you not do to become who you are now? And obviously work ethic's a huge part of it, but there is
hmm
also a skill set and a point at which an inflection point where it's like, I actually know what I'm doing here, and that starts to get recognized.
I attribute that to my mentor. What I teach class now, what I tell everyone is, if you don't understand why things happen or why we do things in a certain progression, you can't improvise when something else comes up.
Hmm.
And you you have to imagine my mentor was me when I was coming up, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, bigger than I am. That guy's probably forgot more than I'll ever know, just based on the experience that he came up. He was
Mm.
second generation. He worked for his father, and his father trained him. So he'd been in this forever. And what I learned from him was, again, how to think. How do you process things? People ask me, how did you figure that out? I'm not Tony Stark. The way I see things, I blow things up and I see them 3D images in my mind. That's what
Right.
I see. But I got that from my mentor. You've got to picture this. You can't imagine just blindly. You have to actually see the components and think about how this is going on. His favorite words were, "Let me troubleshoot this thing." And we were working on a generator one day because it went down. And I said, "You know how to work on a generator?" He said, "No, but let's think about it from the perspective of we've got fuel, we've got compression, we've got this." And it ended up being a fuel pump. I
Yep.
mean, of all things.
Sure.
That's how I learned to think. Now, coming up behind him, he slowly started stepping back out of the field and was working with me, trying to get me to take his spot and hoping that I would one day produce something. But it's not it's not an easy skill to learn. As far as like, can I get you, if I trained you for 4 days to go out and do this? No. You have to know how to run a wireline truck. You have to know how to run Warrior. You've got to know a certain amount of things before I can say, okay, now let's apply all this mathematics and then these technical skills. I'm showing you how these tools work, and then I can turn you loose.
Okay.
Whenever I started coming up with my mentor, his customers would call him directly. Well, I started getting on jobs that he would send me on because, you're not going to send me on one of your favorite customers if I'm going to go out there and screw it up. I'm going to send you out with this guy. Well, I'd go do a job for this company, and the company would be like, "Man, you did a good job. We'll call you back for the next one." That's how I ended up starting growing. And I had an old fishing tool hand named Paul Waldrop out of San Angelo tell me, he said, "Son, you got to remember, you're the one doing the job." He said, "The name on that side of the truck is who you're protecting." He said, "But you're the one they're seeing. Make sure when you're doing this job, you think that name is your name." And I thought, well, that makes sense. So that's how I treated it more and more. And that's what I ended up doing. Every
Yeah.
time I worked for a wireline company, it didn't matter who it was for, what I was doing, I made sure that they felt like it was me that was out there because I'm the one doing the job.
Hmm.
When you see results with like a medical doctor and your mother goes and sees him, she's had really good rapport, your sister goes to over there, that's what it ends up becoming. I'm not a doctor. I just get you positive results, and people start passing that around. "Hey, call this guy. We had pretty good luck with him. Let's see if we can
Yeah.
get him out there." That's
Yeah.
how I got to where I'm at, literally.
Yeah.
The Sandridge deal back down here with all these rigs, like I said, they had like 48 rigs down here. That was probably the biggest help that I'd had since anything, because most of those consultants, when they split and that company finally got out of here, all of those customers that I was working for became my customers. They just carried on.
Yeah.
I actually got stranded down there for a good while, and I started losing work. And I'm like, man, I can't go anywhere. I'm having to
Wow.
drive back and forth from the Barnett. I had a company up there that I was working for that would call me, and I'd be like, "Man, I'm down here in Fort Stockton. Oh, we'll just wait on you." man, it's like a 6 hour drive just
Yeah.
to get back to Snyder to get, you know, supplies and then head that direction. They would wait 12 hours for me to get over there. And then I'd be over there, and then Sanders would call and say, "Hey, well, where you at?" Well, I'm outside of Denton. I'm looking
Yeah.
at the golf course right now. You golfing? I said, "No, I'm on a drilling rig." I said, "I can't. I'm stuck out here." Well, when are you going to be done? Man, I don't know. We'll just wait on you. We'll draw on it for another 12 hours, and then we'll call you back. And I'm thinking, well, we've been up for 2 days out here. Now I got to drive 12 hours to get back over there.
I'm envisioning a pipe whisperer helicopter where you can just, really
Man,
quickly bounce between sites. I think that'd be perfect for you
had
in the
people tell me
future.
that.
Yeah.
It's just, nah. That's why I created the software. It's getting to that point where I can take that software and I can run this thing online if you have
Wow.
problems. But I've got to get more out of it.
Yeah.
Essentially, what I want to do is build a complete 3-point system where I can operate it from anywhere, even on my phone. It's coming. It's not here yet, but it's coming. And I'm having to do all this out of my pocket. I just don't want any outside interference or someone trying to push me to release something that I know is not going to be what I would run.
I like thought we'll get into the software piece. What I really want to understand for me, because I got questions just because I'm just curious about how all this works. Why does a company call you right now? So they obviously get something stuck, but could you walk us through the reason they're calling you and maybe the situation that they have that they're saying, look, John can get this solved for us. Like, what is that phone call like?
Well, so essentially, if you're in a drilling operation like this company that's trying to get a hold of me right now they're stuck. They've got a bit sticking right outside of the casing. They've got an agitator at 1,800 feet, and the motor is spinning free. They can't get it loose. They may try surface jar, but they're too deep from what I can see on this text messages. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what it becomes. Now we're in a hurry. We need something done quickly. And I've got a fishing tool hand out there with a buddy of mine who's telling them, this is the guy you want because it's spinning right now. There's things I can still do with this that,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, I can back them off. In a back off is when you unscrew the pipe. You use an explosive charge to do it. You have to imagine we apply just enough left-hand torque just before the point that it unscrews on its own. We apply just enough torque, and then we apply that explosive shot, and that's actually what jars that connection loose.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've got plasma cutters. There's other things we can do with this thing to get them where they can go in with jars and try to fish it out.
The plasma cutter thing, like you've posted about that on LinkedIn, and you might have made a comment on our TikTok page as well about it. But what does that do? I mean, it sounds pretty Tony Stark to me. So what is that exactly?
Man, I did not create this thing. This is I've been working with the Chamas family since the beginning of my career. I was literally, when I first started, we were dressing chemical cutters, which is a bromine trifluoride cutter. And the guy's uncle, Eddie Chamas or Chamas, was the guy that developed that cutter. So fast forward, now his nephew's in business for himself. It's called Chamas Cutter, and his son is now working with him. They they contacted me a few years ago. I was working for another company and said, "Hey, we've got this thermite based cutter, and it ends up when you ignite it, it forces that torch. It's basically a thermite torch
Mhm.
that burns that pipe in two. It's a cutting torch, and it
Okay.
comes out at 7,000 degrees at 15,000 psi is what I've been told, and it's instantaneous. There was another company that had one before, MCR. They called it the RCT or radio cutting torch, and they're they've been in that game, I think, a little bit longer than anybody else. But like I said, the reason why I stuck with the Chamas cutters is because I've been running their chemical cutters
Yeah.
for decades, literally.
Okay.
The the Chamas plasma cutter has got some points in it that are really, really good. You can you can really push that cutter to make some cuts on some large tubulars with small OD cutters, which is
Mm.
helpful, especially if you've got fishing tools or you've got a work string that's got a small ID in it. The first time that I used it, I actually put him through the ringer. He'd come out with an electric anchor because the electric anchor holds the cutter in place before it. And I called Mark. I said, "Hey, you said you had the plasma cutter. You got that anchor already? He said, well, yeah, we just got through with it, but we haven't tested it. I said, send it to me. I'm going to put it to the test. And he's like, what? I said, I've got a job for a company over here that has an X in its name, and they really, really want me to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's kind of like, well, how deep we working? 15,000 feet. He's like, oh, only you would call me with something like this. I said, but Bubba, I wouldn't stick it in the hole if it didn't have your name on it. You believe in your product or not? I believe in your product. Let's do it. So we go in the hole. We make 3 cuts. Make the first one. It doesn't come because it's stuck. We go in, make a free point run. We see where it's stuck. We cut it. It comes right out. And when it comes out, it's beautiful. I mean, I've still got the video with the fishing tool hand that was out there. Just like, man, this is a beautiful cut. The instance of being able to improvise is these guys know the mathematics behind the pressure and the hydrostatic pressures and all that stuff versus the thermite. I'm not that guy. If I have a question, I call Mark. I say, hey man, I've got this tubular. Well, what's the wall thickness? What's your hydrostatic pressure? They do the math and they say, I'd run this. The other day, they were able to make a cut in the Gulf for, I can't remember what the oil company was, but they actually cut 5.5 with a 2-inch OD cutter. They went through a small ID and made it cut. Now, I don't know if you ever would get into this business, but that's pretty unheard of. You know, a jet cutter for 5.5 is 4.5, or you might get as small as 3.8, but to run a 2-inch OD cutter and get this pipe cut, I mean that's a big deal. I wasn't the one that did it. I advertised on LinkedIn and I put it on TikTok, or Juan Macias put one together for me as well,
Yeah.
and it was like just in awe of what Chamas cutters had achieved. We've been really, really working together with a lot of them. Their cutters, from what I'm told, I've run more than anybody yet of the Chamas cutters, but I've had really good luck with them. Lateral, upside down, sideways, you name it, they'll cut it. You just have to have the right anchor to make it work.
Gotcha.
It's a family business, and to me that means a lot, to be honest. But it also helps when the product delivers.
I mean, that's I love the independent, like there's that sort of like, the get it done mentality, the we can be creative, we can get this done faster. All that plays into it. I'm imagining, Wade, that if you called John here, you have a problem.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that every conversation, I would like, just like John is saying, I got a couple of guys on, saved in my contact list, and the conversation is usually at 2 in the morning, and they're like, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "Well, it's not going well." Whenever I'm calling you, I mean, you kind of, it feels like going to the dentist. You know what I mean? It's one of those,
That's it.
it's like, oh, but hey, it's really nice to talk to you, but I wish I didn't have to, kind of a deal.
That's why I don't make sales calls.
I was gonna say, well, a couple of years ago, it's funny you talk about Chamas cutters because I had to run Chamas cutters in 5.5 drill pipe. It was Christmas of 2022 or 23.
Yeah, I got a question on that job. I'm trying to remember.
It was we had 5.5 inch drill pipe that was literally parting at 220 hook load, no torque, nothing, and it was just this. You could tell it was just like this. It wasn't like a plastic deformation, like where it stretched and then broke. I mean, it was just literally. I mean, we were working tight hole at about 8,000 feet, and we were pulling up at 220, which actual pipe weights like 170, 180
Yeah.
right there. It was just parting, and we ended up having to run a Chamas cutter in there to get
Did y'all
to
get
get
the
our
cut
string up.
after all?
Oh yeah, we did,
Yeah.
and it was like you said, it was super clean. We needed a clean top on it so that we could go back down and jar on it and everything. But I think we finally put that Chamas cutter in there. We had 2 or 3 of those parts at a really low string weight. And so when you were saying that, I was like, I'm pretty familiar with being able to, because in drill pipe, we don't have that smooth ID. We've got
Hmm.
some constrictions, and so
Yeah, the
it
tool
was.
joints always end up being smaller. I mean, the most
Oh
common
yeah.
is like 4-inch ID, but I just got off a job where they had a 3.5 ID in it. And it's, if you don't have a small enough cutter to get there and make the cut, you could be in a bind.
You really get limited. And so it was. I remember that. I remember that job very well.
I got a call on that. Someone had asked me, have you cut 5.5 with this thing yet? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it'll do it. What are you
Right.
trying to do? He said, well, this thing's falling apart on a man. We pick up on it. They pick up to like 260,000 as part. That's what they told me, is 260. And I said, well, I ran into an H2S well here the other day, and I tried to talk the operator into doing it, and they decided to run the Weltec electric cutter because they
Okay.
had 4-inch ID tool joints. I said, but
Okay.
they got 3 overshots in the hole. And, of course, he starts laughing. I think that's what they got out there. I said, well, you could run either, but if it were me, I'd run the plasma cutter. That way you don't have to pull that much.
I did. We had parted that pipe. We got an overshot over it, and then it parted again above our overshot. And so we ended up having 2 overshots in there. We ended up actually getting all the overshots out. We never got the fish
Yeah,
out because the pipe kept on parting on us,
right.
but we ended up getting a lot of that back. That's hilarious. I'm really starting to wonder if you were like, if we
Yeah.
had conferenced in with you on that phone
Someone
call.
talked to me about it. I'm trying to remember who it was, but they were
I'm gonna
asking
try
me
and keep,
questions
yeah.
about it.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
And
but
and,
yeah,
and of course,
the cutter was great. I mean, it was like whenever it came out, oh my gosh, it was a great cut on there. It was,
yeah. Oh yeah.
super,
So
super.
there's the flip side. Not talking bad about MCR, but MCR has a 2.5-inch XRT. Their cutter has windows in it, and there's little pieces of steel that hold the bottom half of that cutter together. So when
Right,
you fire this cutter, it doesn't melt off and drop it in the hole. If you tried to do that with that pipe, you wouldn't have been able to get the cut
right,
because it leaves 4 little tabs. I equate it to this. If you remember the Japanese, when they dropped the atomic bomb in Japan, they still have marks of people that were standing there where the shadows on the sidewalk. It does the same thing with the thermite. If there's not a continuous port, you're going to have those shadows that you're not going to get that full cut with. Chamas cutters has got a continuous
right,
port on every one of their cutters. And like I said, we have been able to make some really, really amazing cuts because of that. We don't have to try to pull it in two. It's in two.
Wow.
yep,
Even if it's stuck, you can make a cut. And of course, you got to be careful about what you're cutting in. You don't want to do this in
right,
sand, but if it's just like limestone or something like that, you can make that cut and it'll be there. But you'll have to jar it in two after you get latched
right,
onto it, after you get your free cut up here. But
right.
it is possible to get it.
That's crazy. It's a small world, man.
Yeah.
It's
Good to talk to you again under different circumstances this time.
Yeah. You know how it is. I get all of the crap calls. When last resort's on, I get calls from like Utah, or I've got a call. The other day I was answering a phone call for someone in PA, and it was like, I'm just answering questions and not
Right.
trying to get involved because I'm not going up there.
So speaking of not having to move around too much, I know you're working on a software program, and we kind of alluded to it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're working on this with your son as well.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So originally when we got this thing, I had hired contracted a programmer to come up with this thing. And I found someone that had a interface that I could use. So I've started playing with it, and we figured out that we could make it work. So I had them design it. And we were going to use, I can't remember if it was Android, or we were going to use someone else's platform that would allow
Mhm.
us to stream it. And I'm telling my sons, because I've got both my boys working with me, but I'm telling my sons, I'm like, man, this is going to be great, and then we get nearly all the way to the end, and the programmer says, yeah, we can't do that like that. They're not going to let us do that. I mean, you just can't do it that way. And I thought, okay, well, great. Glad I spent all this money on this thing. I mean, this is just,
No kidding.
awesome. And of course, he was just like, man, there's got to be another way you could figure it out. And I'm leaving Fort Worth, and I'm upset, and I'm talking to my son, and my son finally says, Dad, why don't we just use Discord? And I
Mhm.
thought, the
Huh.
messaging app that we've been using? He said,
Yeah.
yeah. He said, man, we can stream it all on there. I mean, it would work. And I thought, okay. I mean, let me get it out first and let's try it.
Yeah.
That's what we've been doing.
Wow.
We and him were using it. My son in Odessa were using it for a messaging app because he really wanted this phone that he got. And of course, for some reason, whenever you got it and put it on Verizon, text messages didn't work with it.
Mhm.
So he said, let's just use Discord. I'll message you on that. So I got to playing with that, and I'm not a gamer or anything like that. He is, and that's what he uses. He builds what do you call them? Here I my old man. He does the platforms for a bunch of other kids that have their gamer forums. Hey, we want to have a tournament. He'll set up stuff for them and put them all in, and he'll run the whole chat as they're playing, and they can watch or do whatever they're doing.
Right.
So it's no different for him than what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is actually lower stress for him, because he's just like, I'm just adding people and putting them in and muting them and making sure that nobody gets in your way. They're just able to watch the free point.
Wow.
My next rendition with this, with my panel and with my free point that I'm building, is going to be fully controlled. So we're maybe switching to a different platform. But if you're wanting to stream and your customer wants to see this, like, wait, if I was doing a job for you down here.
Wait, so you're saying like you're gonna be in the van, in the wireline van or
Mhm.
wireline truck, and
Yep.
I'll be able to like. I've always thought like one of the great things, like
You can
on the
watch it on
rig.
your phone.
I was gonna say on the rig, like being able to see my pace on feed is invaluable for me, right? So being able to see that from the wireline, plus also to have that direct communication would be amazing. I've got a rig right now that I just picked up a couple weeks ago, and it's funny. I thought at first I thought it was like a novelty type deal. They were talking about cameras, and they've got cameras all over the rig. And I told him, I said, well, if you put one of those on the shakers, like I
Mhm.
might not be able to pull myself away from it. And sure enough, I tell you, like the amazing thing is like just the other night we were having some hole issues. And so like my consultant, he's up on the rig floor, he's right over the driller's shoulder. They're constantly talking and they're watching the pipe and watching all their gauges and everything. But I'm at the house, I've got my earbud in, I'm on a direct line with him, and I can see my pace on right here, and then my TV to the left, I'm watching the shakers because
Yep.
he can't see the shakers from the rig floor. You
Yep.
know what I mean? And so I'm like, oh well, there's a burp of flow, and here, we're seeing this is what we're seeing over there and all that, instead of having to have hands over there sending us videos and all that stuff. So it's pretty amazing, man, being able to bring that technology and being able to be able to do a lot of that
So
stuff.
we've been
I
able
love that
to
idea.
put cameras out for the weight indicator and then the pipe. So you can
Okay.
actually watch your torque as you're applying it. You can
Right.
see the torque gauges. You can see the pipe as it's moving, watching the weight indicator. And it helps me in the truck too, because I'll set up screen up where I can watch it as we're applying the stretch and
Right.
the torque. And then you can actually see the free point live as it's going.
Well, and I was gonna say that's a really cool deal because I mean, been a lot of times I've been sitting in the wireline van and I've got my pace on up because I'm watching their pump rate, and all that stuff. So instead of having to use the radios and go back and forth and inevitably, miscommunication or whatever, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different things. So me sitting in the truck with my iPad up, being able to say, oh yeah, we're pumping 4 barrels a minute or
Well, the
whatever,
cool
and
thing
see
is
the
as well,
speed.
you can message while you're doing this. So, the
Right.
customer can, let's just say the boss in East Texas is watching. He can message on there and say, "Hey, what happened there? Or what are
Right.
we doing?"
Does
And
that
you
make you
can
does all this
respond
make you
immediately.
nervous though? I mean,
Not
now
really.
you got a gallery of 6 people behind you watching you, too many cooks in the kitchen?
Man, it's not a, I've been fortunate. I don't have someone standing there asking me a million questions. And this thing dumbs it down to the point of you've got a colored bar chart. Red is stuck, orange is stuck, yellow, you really don't want to mess with. When it starts seeing green, you start seeing
Right.
green in that bar chart, everything's good. You'd be amazed how many times the questions just fall off once they see it. Then it becomes, okay,
Gotcha.
now we know what's going on.
And then
I've
understand
tried
more.
to make it as easy to understand. If you're running a logarithmic tool like the spring tool,
Huh?
it doesn't work in percentages. My tools, when I set them up, I aim for a certain range of where I want to see the tool opening. But if I'm at 5 thousandths of an inch open, I'm aiming for 52 points. The the spring tool advantage is that this coil is made to give you 50% of the deflection on your meter from 0 to 100. 50% of that is in the first 5 thousandths of an inch. And it was designed for drill collars. Now imagine trying to explain, well, we were getting 85 points up hole. Now we're in this
Right.
drill collar and we're seeing 30. That's stuck, right? No, it's not.
Right.
We're supposed to get about 48. It's restricted. With the software, I input the data of where these ranges are going to be because I can calculate what readings I'm going to get before I even get the hole
Right.
mathematically. I can type them in, range is set, and drop in, and then it's spitting out colors. I just switch between the tubulars that I'm free pointing,
Right.
and they're watching it, and it's like, this is easy to understand. It
You
cuts
got
all the
different.
questions out. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because you have to imagine if you're free pointing, let's just say you're 5.5 drill pipe, if I'm applying 40,000 pounds overpull, depending on which tool I use, you're going to get 17 thousandths of an inch overpull of opening between my tool. Now, when I drop into an 8-inch drill collar, if I pull 100,000
Yeah,
pounds over, I'm going to get 5 thousandths of an inch.
right.
And then I still have to argue with the engineers every now and then. Well, you can't really stretch drill collars. I've been doing it all my life.
You apply enough, it'll move a little bit,
Yeah,
just a lot less.
I've even seen 11-inch drill collars stretch. So I mean,
But
and they'll
it's
torque.
and see with ours, like a lot of our drillings with 4-inch drill pipe. So the stretch on 4-inch drill pipe, you kind of got to be careful the other way, right? You're like,
Right. Well,
you
so
know, it moves a
there's
lot, you know.
there's a constant that I use for that, but for that I think I'm using 20,000 pounds.
Right.
Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we're anchored in the pipe and we're reading just what's in between our anchors. And this is a motorized tool. This is essentially, you can see that, that's essentially what you're seeing. When one end is anchored in the pipe, the other end's anchored in the other end, and you apply that stretch, you're seeing that. And then you're applying torque, that's what you're seeing. And of course, that's the motorized tool. It has, this one's an old school coil style. There's a magnet on the end of this one, and this coil is sitting there and it's reading the magnetic flux from that magnet. Now, once you calibrate this tool to 0, when you pull it open, you'll get a deflection. Based on how much you're overpulling is going to be what your deflection is. And you're using that panel to capture that deflection. So if I want a lower sensitivity, I'll pull a little bit more because there'll be a higher frequency shift. And then I'll capture it between 0 to 100. And then if I want higher, if I can't get enough out of it like a drill collar, if I'm just reading drill collars to drill collars, you can pull a lot more, you can pull a lot less, whatever that deflection is, as long as you're calibrating in free pipe, you're just taking that number
Right.
and going down the string to try to prove where it's stuck. It's like scientific method. There's nothing scientific about this, but whatever strain you apply to this tubular, as long as you apply the same strain from here
Right.
to here, when you find that stuck point, it's going to be different. I mean, there's really no magic to this. It's not black magic.
It sure looks like magic to someone that's hearing about it and how it works. It's amazing.
Well, the fun part was when I first started this, I love mathematics, and my mentor was telling me, because he'd tell me, hey, come here and calculate this for me, Mr. Math Whiz. And I'd calculate whatever he's telling me. And then I was starting paying attention to these equations. And I'm like, dude, this is like physics. I wanted to teach physics, I thought, wait a minute. You telling me that you guys are really calculating this? And yeah, what's wrong with that? I mean, right, this is the fun part. You're actually using the equations and we're seeing the results here. So when I started seeing all this and started really paying attention, it grabbed me. I mean, this is 100%. This is what hooked me, was being able to use the mathematics and the algebra that I learned even in high school and going to college. I thought, this is what I want to do. This is badass to me. We were on a job and snowing, sleeted, it rained. I mean, it was horrible weather conditions. And my mentor's walking by me as I'm breaking a tool out, and he says, "Don't be a fool. Stay in school." And I looked back at him. I said, "Man, I like this stuff. This is to me, this is badass." And he says, he just kind of looked at me like, "This kid's crazy."
Yeah.
So the more that I started asking questions, it became to him like, I think maybe this guy's serious. Maybe he's going to stick with it. 30 years in it, man. I'm not going anywhere. And again, I'm too stupid to do anything else. I mean, I can't drill a well. I can't drill a well.
I doubt that.
I really can't. I cannot drill a well. I didn't write the program to the code. I'm learning code now. Now I'm taking online courses to learn code because I'm interested in how all that stuff works. But this is when it comes to my little world of the fishing industry and with Wireline involved, and I'm talking like pipe recovery, not fishing cable or any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
In my little world, I always try to do homework on everything. If I'm sitting at home and I'm not on a job, you can ask my wife. She thinks I'm crazy. I'm looking stuff up. I'm watching videos. I'm constantly searching for the next thing or something that stimulates me, that makes me think. And then it's like, I wonder how that works this way. What is this, how does that work? I'll do my research and try to figure out anything that I can about it. Like I
It's
always tell my students, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
Well, like I always tell my students, my favorite answer, if I don't know something, is I don't know, but I'll find out. I'm not going to blow any smoke up your rear trying to convince you that I know all or see all. Everything in my little world, I know it. Anything outside of that, if I don't know, I'll ask. If I've got an idea, I'll make a comment. Kind of like how we first got interacting. If I see something and something is said wrong, I'm not saying something to correct somebody to be mean. I'm trying to make sure that they understand this is the correct thought process. I don't teach at Top Gun for ego. I teach at Top Gun to try to help the wireline industry and help bring a little more knowledge into the world so that these guys can go out and be successful.
Yeah.
That's my main goal.
We need all the good trained wireline hands we can get, man.
It's pretty thick out there.
They got to bail us out sometimes.
So I call it the wolves of pipe recovery. The wolves of Wall Street, where that guy's sitting there selling them a line of crap, and he's doing this on the phone, and he's talking crap and everybody back there laughing and he's selling this up. That's what you end up with. And you've got a smooth talking kid who's got a good personality. He don't know what the hell he's doing. And he's selling you on something that he saw. I equate it to the dartboard. And not all of them are like this. I mean, a lot of these kids can get by with experience. But this is why. Imagine standing in front of a dartboard with a big handful of darts, and you got a blindfold on. You throw a dart over here, it don't work. You throw a dart over here, it don't work. Up here, down here, and you start hitting the board. And then you're close. That's what you got. Someone who's hitting the board enough, and they're in that realm, and they've got an idea of what they're doing. And they get results if things shift outside of their understanding. Remember, if you don't understand why, you cannot adapt. Those are the guys that end up finding out, just how much they know. I've replaced companies before that were completely, they're right there. Not being mean. They were right there. They just didn't understand that you had to have fluid inside the pipe to get it back off. Just a simple question. Mind you, I'm the third guy out there and I'm asking questions and the guy's like, what do you need to know that for? Well, these are the questions that I have. I've got them all written down here. Okay. I'm just going down my list to get them. And then the guy's laughing about it and he's answering my questions and I'm looking at the pipe and they've got a full stand sticking up in the air. I can't get a tool in there. The tool joint's 26 foot up in the air and they were near surface. They can't pull it up high enough to set the slips out to break it out.
Stretch. Yeah.
And I tell the guy, let me just back that off right there and just get those two joints out of the way. And then they're all looking at me like, what? I said, yeah, let me just back that off right there. We'll just put a string shot in there from the top. I can get a string shot and a call locator in there. I can't get a free point in there. And he just kind of, huh? Okay, you want to do that? That's fine. And the first thing I said was, we got to pump some fluid though. What for? The string shots don't work without fluid. And they lost their minds. Like, you got to be kidding me. You mean we've been shooting down here? We knew this thing was on a vacuum. There ain't no fluid in that hole. And I'm just laughing. I'm going, man, again, I just got here. I don't have any frame of reference as to what anyone else did. I'm going based off of specifically what the questions that I asked. And this is information that I ask every well that I go to because I don't want to get bit. And I'm first call out there now. They never even heard of me. Now it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Everybody's got stories
understand
like that.
why. You have to understand the why in order to be able to adapt or
love it.
See what's going on.
Well, John, I'm just thankful that you were willing to come on. I didn't think that this episode was gonna ever happen, and here we are talking. You got to get reintroduced to Wade. Hopefully, you guys don't have to. Wade's not calling you. Maybe it's the other way around.
It's one of the best conversations I've ever had with a fishing hand. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Well, and
totally.
this is free. You know what I mean? This is not you shouldn't have to sign
Exactly.
a ticket at the end of
Right.
this day. You know.
Yeah. So anyways, I really appreciate you coming on. I love your obsession with what you're doing. I think any one of us that's loves what we do and can like kind of show people through action and just even, obsession with anything off the clock and how much time you still spend studying and learning. So thank you for being a huge supporter of me, of Wade, as we've kind of gotten this little podcast going, even though it was just, comments on TikTok went a long ways and just being an educator there too. So anyways, I hope you have an amazing day. I hope you go find what you need. If you guys want to get in touch with John, I will have his contact info will be in the comments below and the link below. But yeah, ask questions. John he's in it every day, and just really appreciate being here. So yeah, until next week, thank you guys for listening to Local Energy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.